long title is leveraging data, project management data, accounting data to increase organizational effectiveness. But really, what I want to make clear during this presentation is that Power BI is a game changer. It's changed my life. It's changed my clients' lives. So I was doing something the other day. I'm a hockey player, just like every stereotypical Canadian. And in my spare time, when I need to get away from my desk, I go play hockey. And that's when I come up with my best solutions. And our team was talking about how can we be more effective? How can we be better on the ice? You know, we're not in our 20s anymore. How can we compete? And one of the solutions we talked about was let the puck do the work for you. You know, very common in sports, right? You can throw the ball faster, you can pass it faster than you can skate or you can run it. And I was like, this is exactly like Power BI. It's exactly the same thing. I can print files off, I can go and I can look between two screens and I can enter them from this software to that software. I mean, who's been there? I don't see a lot of hands, but I don't believe you. So you can do that, but why do that? Why should we do that? We should use the tools that we have in front of us, and if we use them well, we can save ourselves a lot of stress, and our teams a lot of stress as well. So today, I'm just going to go through, a number of things. I don't think we need to talk about everything, but basically we want to start at point A and get you to point D. How do we get going in Power BI? And one of the main things that I want to talk about and have you guys focus on is how can I use this in my day-to-day? How can I make my life easier? Not only that, how do I make my organization's effectiveness? Like, how do I increase that and the efficiencies that come along with it? So I'm Gillian, Canadian, obviously. Those are the few of the things that I do. It does not say that I'm a middle tier 2 spare time hockey player. And I work for Olsen Consulting. We are a Canadian-based firm. And basically, a lot of our principles are just efficiency and effectiveness. How can we drive that for our clients? How can we leverage their data? And we also do some cool integrations, different things. We have a full e-signature, DocuSign integration that a lot of our clients have liked. But basically, how can we make your organization more effective? So why Power BI? We've already talked about a few of the things, but basically you can integrate a lot of data sources together. You are not limited to a box. You can pull from the web, you can pull from your database, your ERP, Excel. Then you can take that and you can do really cool visualizations, and that helps with exception reporting. Because how many times have you sat in a meeting and you go through every single job, you're doing a WIP review at the end of the month or maybe quarterly, and you go through every single job, and if I ask you one question about a job, what's the likelihood that you can answer me? Probably not much, unless there was a major problem, right? And so it helps with that exception reporting. You can also, with that exception reporting, go and drill down into more information. So I can see that this project isn't going very well. What's going on here? I want to dig down. Maybe it's productivity, right? Like labor productivity. So then that's segmentation. How do I drive down? How do I go in? What's the historical information? What is it looking like? What's this piece of it? Maybe it's labor, maybe it's material, that kind of thing. So increased efficiency. You'll probably hear that a lot during this conversation. But yeah, I like to increase efficiency. So let's highlight things that aren't going well, and let's highlight things that are going well, and let's jump into those. And then accessibility and control. So one of the advantages of Power BI that has great advantage over Excel is I can control who can access things, who can see things, and what they can do in it. You can't do that in Excel, you can't always control that, there's version problems, people jump in, they change a formula, you don't catch it, and then you're stuck with these errors. You sent it off to your CFO already, and they're asking you questions about it, and you realize, oh, I just didn't validate this, or I didn't have time to validate this. Another really cool thing about Power BI is the integration with Microsoft. So the 365 Office, you can put this into Teams, you can embed reports, you can do this in PowerPoint here. You can actually push data into Excel for those of us who still love Excel. So everything in one place. So we kind of touched on this, but you can pull, you're not limited to that box, you're not limited to your ERP. You can pull in web data, so whether maybe there's some COVID data that you want to pull, you can do that through API, you can do some web scraping. And then ad hoc reports can also go in there. So if you receive something that doesn't go into your ERP, you can also join that data up. Got a little story, but how many of you have been caught in what I like to call Excel hell? So, me too. I was working in the energy industry, and we were doing this thing, and it was monthly, and we were doing incurred cost projections. And everybody would send me their inputs. So think about this, I'm getting 3, 4, 5 divisions worth of inputs, and then I'm having to validate that. And then what it would do is get our incurred forecast. Then we would go into that and we would send it off to our CFO, who then would take that input and put it into his own input and try to schedule cash flow. There's a lot of data floating around, and you can imagine how many times I got different versions from different people. And I'm sitting there and I'm validating things side by side, and going, obviously making mistakes, and no time to do any strategic analysis. So is this really correct? Can we actually, can we execute this project better? I'm not spending my time doing that because I'm too busy validating data. Well, Power BI can help us with those things. And I remember sitting there and asking myself, and this is about probably 9 years ago, so this is just on the cusp of all these Power BI, and Tableau was around, View was around, but not the same. It just wasn't the same integration and the same use case, and not as approachable. And so I said, well, there's got to be a better way. So I left that job and started studying business intelligence. So I want to show you how easy some of this stuff is, because I think that's really important. We talk a lot about the what during these technical presentations, but how do I get started? Because people get nervous. You throw words out there like API and web scraping, and people go, what's that? So this is just a quick little video. It just shows you how simple it can be. This is off a website. We're pulling data in, like weather data, into a Power BI dashboard, Power Query here, and it just pulls it in. It's simple as copy and paste, you throw it in, and it brings it all up. Connects, refreshes, and it does a lot of these transformations for you, because I think it comes in a JSON format, but that's how quick and easy it can be to get started. So this one is a dashboard that has been built out to show how we can bring weather data in. How many of you work with your PMs and they say, oh yeah, we're doing okay, but weather was a problem. So we wanted to test that and bring all the information in and say, hey, was weather actually a problem on your productivity? Did it impact everything? So this is measuring that. How are we doing against what really was the weather? The other part of this is, how can we look at future information? So what is the forecast of weather? It'll jump over to that in a minute, but that's really important too for anybody who does any project management or portfolio planning, but how do we plan our resources? How do we move our equipment? Where do we put them in the right spot? So that helps solve that problem. And I'm not sure what the PMs came up with next, but I'm sure we can bring the data in. This jumps over, and then we've got the forecast data, so you can look ahead and see what's going on. So data modeling is one of my favorite things in Power BI. Who is familiar with VLOOKUP and probably less so, but index match? So there's all sorts of different data modeling, but basically what I want you to get out of this picture is that these are essentially a lot of VLOOKUPs. You make the connection once, or index match. It's really more index match. I mean, there's a whole argument about what's better, but index match because you're not limited to the left side and then you have to move to the right. So more like an index match. But basically the best thing about this is like you create that relationship once. There's not a lot of management that goes into it. And with your VLOOKUPs and your index matches that you're very often having to go through. Why did something fail? You've got data that's now dragged down below, and maybe the formula didn't copy all the way. So this essentially handles that for you. There's star schemas, there's reverse star schemas, there's snowflakes. I don't think we need to worry about that here, but different ways of modeling data to make things more efficient and calculate faster. So teamwork. Another really great thing is the ability to collaborate and share. So we can throw up a workspace and we can give people access to that workspace. And then you can have multiple people working on the same data set. Or, someone's building visualization, someone's working on the data sets. So that's really neat. You've got roles and permissions. We talked about security a little bit. So roles and permissions. So some people you want to access the data set, some people you don't. Some people you want to be able to share a dashboard. Some people you really don't. You just want them to be viewers. And then you can embed reports. So there's options to embed reports in all different ways. So Microsoft Teams. You can look at publish to web, which that's tricky and you need to be very careful with because you don't want to push your client data or your data up to a website, right? But intranet and those kinds of things, so you can do secure portals. You can also go back to basics and just share PBX files. I mean, probably one of the least efficient ways to do it, but you can. And then there's apps, and apps are a way to group data. And basically you can throw up an app and you can do things like, we did one for project management dashboard, and then we had the labor productivity dashboard underneath that. They're very similar data sets, and it allowed you to, hey, what are we doing? How are we doing it on this project? Hey, maybe it's labor productivity, and that's one of the things we have the most influence over as PMs. And so you can jump into that and you can actually review it right in the same space. And so it's really handy for our users. So they start here and then they can move progressively through the different types of data. Data sets and data flows. So data sets is a way to share like a model and analytics later. One nice thing about that is it's one source of the truth. So you can have a model that gets reused over and over again, and people can build the reports on top of that. So really handy, right? Because you're not having people call or define the same word different ways. You can reuse that information over and over again. Data flows is more like the ETL layer, so it's somewhat separate. It does a lot of the transformations before it gets there. A lot of people get confused between what the difference is, but the data flow, a really good example of that is like something that you use very often, so a calendar table. So say you have one specific for that financial calendar table that you want everybody to use, and you want them to be able to pull that in to their own data sets. So again, utilizing that one source of the truth principle and applying it, but for each specific scenario and what makes sense. So here's a little example. You can go to our website and we've got live project management dashboard. This is not client data. It's anonymized and test data, I think. But yeah, you can go and see this on our website and you can play with it. You can actually sit there and even slice and dice right on a public website. So that's pretty neat. People like that. It is, like I said, a little bit dangerous and a risk to security. So you have to make sure only certain people have access to these kinds of things. And then this one is publishing to the cloud. So we're talking about collaborating and sharing. So Power BI is free. You can get the desktop version for free. But the power in it comes really is like pushing and sharing and collaborating. So you have to have a Pro license or a premium license. Most people just go with Pro. But I just want to show you how easy it is. You can go publish. You literally pick the dashboard and you push it up to the cloud. And then you give people access to this information from there. So they log in online, and you can see everything there. This is my favorite part. I'll make the boring stuff. So this is like letting the pump do the work for you. Basically Power Query. So we perform repeatable steps all the time. I mean, how many times do you guys do the same thing month over month? Like a bank reconciliation or transfer a file, and then go, I have to remove this column again, but no more. So friends don't let friends not use Power Query. and manually manipulate files. That is one of my takeaways from this. But these are some of the very common things. So you split columns, you pull out pieces of information that you like, you merge tables together essentially, or you can only pull over certain information, but you merge by a VLOOKUP or an index match. Well, no more. So this is an example of a file. So get this file. We were doing an on-site. Actually, my boss sent this to me. He said, here, fix this. So we did. So we spent a few minutes on it, 35 minutes. And there, I can't remember how many rows there are, but you get to that point where there's 300 rows on something. And you're like, okay, well, I could probably do this in 30 minutes and do it very manually. But you guys probably can guess what happened next. Any guesses?
Got another one.
Got another one. Exactly. Happens all the time. So I'm just going to take you through, this is going to annotate what I'm doing, but basically it's a poorly formatted report. I want to look at it, and I decided you've got data on this line and on this line, they're underneath each other, and you want to bring them together. So how do we do that? I took the data, I split it into two different queries, but the same data source. When I brought that in, I said, okay, well, how can I bring these back together? So by using some filter context and different things, I can say, well, I'm going to filter on the nulls here, and I'm going to filter on the non-nulls over here. And we're going to index these columns. And suddenly I've got the ones lining up with the ones, and I can bring it back together, and removing the things that we don't need and clearing up the file. But now I can do this, and I can do it in a few minutes, and when I get the next file, I think it took 30 seconds. So you bring that back together, and then you get a nice clean file at the end, and we had to run that a few times. And it's one of those small things that someone says, okay, well, it only took me half an hour, or it only took me an hour, but then how many times do you do that hour? How many times do we repeat that process, and on a monthly basis too? What we should be doing is spending our time analyzing information and making decisions on it, not formatting. So join these queries together, bring it in, expand what we want to see. And by the way, all these point and clicks, you can go into them, there's little gear wheels, and you can just click on those, and then you can edit your steps so you're not stuck where you land at the end, which is really nice as well. But now we have a final clean report. This is another example. I don't always do it this way, because this is another one that's like, well, it only takes a few minutes. I get new data, at not even certain intervals, but I get them often enough for different sites. And it's literally just adding a column. So copy paste can do, how long does that take you, right? 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You might want to check it. There's part of that. So maybe that adds to it. But another really cool thing that you can do in Power Query is you can drop stuff to a folder. You can do the transformation once, and it'll do the same thing on every single file in that folder. So here's a little example of something we do. And you can't, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this on large data sets, but you can do it on smaller ones, and then you can utilize kind of the same theory by pushing stuff up to like an Azure blob or a lake. And you'll see, yeah?
What do you define as a large data set or small?
10 million rows, I think, is kind of that threshold that they use in Power BI. But then there's other ways around it. You can do different types of querying. There's import mode, there's direct query, and then you pull from like a data model that's not within Power BI. And then there's advantages and disadvantages to all those different things. It gets pretty technical, but there's different solutions for different problems. And sometimes you can combine the different solutions to bring it all together. So I don't know if you guys saw that, but it just slid out. I mean, I did just use a copy of the file so you can really see the flat line there at the end, but it does slide out, and then you're done. You just push that up, and client's happy. So insights at a glance, this is what we talked about earlier with financials. So, I don't know, anyone want to point out anything that they see immediately? It's test data. Well, I'd be concerned about that net income dropping suddenly. I don't know about you guys. Or the expenses versus last year, how do they increase? So this gives you, at a glance, how are we doing? What's going well, what's not? And now I want more information. If I jump over, and I can look at the revenue side on this one, and what is our main source of revenue? When did it drop? Why did it drop? Maybe that was, it says 2012, but it looks like a COVID drop to me. But there's different things that you can dive into, and then you can slice and dice. You can double click, you can add drill throughs. I mean, there's really neat things, but you can see this, and this is, it doesn't have a map on it or anything, but it very quickly tells you where you are, and I think it's a little bit better than Excel in that way. So that brings us to data alerts. So one of the big things you want to do with Power BI is you want to inspire action. And one of the things you need to do is get people to look at your dashboard to inspire action. So you can publish it all you want, you can put it up on the cloud, but you cannot bring a horse to water. So Power BI data alerts were invented. So look at this dashboard here. We've got an AP and an AR variance. How many of you guys use Viewpoint? Yep, so how many of you have problems with your sub-ledger balancing to your general ledger? Or how many of you know? Because that's the thing, some people don't know. So what we did, we had a client, actually what inspired this is we had a client we did an implementation for, we loaded up all their information, we had the definitions correct for the sub-ledger accounts. And they didn't like that because it kind of forces you to do certain things, right? In Viewpoint, and people don't necessarily like that. And so they turned it off. They took out all the sub-ledger definitions, and then they came back to us later and said, nothing balances. Like, that's what happens when you change setups. But if we had a data alert setting these, we would have known maybe before they did, right? Before they noticed. And a lot of times, these kinds of things, they happen and we don't know, and then we're going to month-end close, and we're looking at this and it's late, and oh, I should check if my sub-ledger's balance, and you run into that problem where they don't. Wouldn't that have been nice to know 3 weeks ago? So the data alert comes through, and you can set it on threshold, you can set it in service, so that's up in the cloud. Set it on a service, and it'll send an email to you. And it'll say, hey, this is out of whack, go and click on it. So one of the things that we do is we have this information from our clients, and we get these alerts when our clients' sub-ledgers go out of whack. We can fix them, they wake up in the morning, none the wiser. Oh, another key thing is this does only work on refresh data. So you're not going to get alert after alert after alert, which is good, because then what ends up happening is people start ignoring the alerts. Kind of defeats the purpose of having an alert. It goes to your inbox. Templates and apps. Okay, so templates. I think one of the best ways to think about templates is that everybody wants, what comes out of this? So we've got a dashboard, we've got all this information, okay, great. What is the deliverable? So a lot of times you want to do a financial report, you want a balance sheet or income statement, you want a cash flow statement. And everybody wants it slightly different. So we can start with a template, we can hook it up to the data set, and then we can tweak it. So it's really handy to send out or have these templates so that we're not starting off at square one every time we go and we want to put together this financial reports. And then apps. So combining related data, you combine data sets, really easy way to share your content widely with your audience and control access. There's a special kind of app, it's called a template app, and that would be for somebody who wants to distribute content to external users, so not just within an organization, but to external users. And that's really handy, so I think it's Microsoft partners, and they can be deployed to any tenant. You have to have pro and premium licensing, but they're really handy. You can jump in on those, and then you can use something that somebody else built. And custom visualizations are really handy, so you're not just locked into this box that they gave you and line graphs and pie charts, but you can go find some custom visuals that might suit your needs. And then the Power Platform. So there is One thing that people say all the time when they go to Power BI, and it's like, well, I cannot write back. I can't manipulate my data as I want to. I have to bring it over to Excel, and then we have to manipulate it, we have to push that. So not entirely true, you can. It's been around for a while, and the Power Platform helps us with that. So Power Apps and Power Automate, you can push stuff back to a SharePoint list, you can update right in there. One of the other cool things with Power Apps and Power Automate is that we want to inspire action, and that lets you take the action. So another good example we thought of was, HR dashboard, maybe you're doing annual reviews and you see that I've got all my annual reviews booked except for maybe 1 or 2. Well, you could throw in a Power App in there and a flow and make it so that, hey, I can do something, I can book a meeting right now, looking at this, and I can send out an Outlook request to people that are missing it. So bringing it all together is super, cliche to say powerful, but it is, because you can inspire action, you can segment your data, and then you can take your action right there. One of the cool things that we're working on right now is the ability to write back. So we talked about this a little bit, but how can we get connection directly up to, especially Vista is customization. I mean, lots of people are probably using financials in Spreadsheet Server or Excel. So we want the ability to write back to Vista. And we have a little demo here. This is just a little test to show you, but this is a Power BI app. And you can see that someone's toggling around and they find something and they want to put in a comment. So they type it in, test comment. And how do we get that back up? So we have to save it and we have to run a function. But it does process it and pushes it up. It says write back done successfully, so that's good. And then you go into your Vista, and you would sync it and refresh, and go look at that account. And you can see that the comment's right there. So it does remove that layer, or that I guess, barrier, where it's like you don't have that right back, or I have to go into Power BI, and then I have to go over here, and I have to do everything in separate places. More cool stuff. So it's kind of more of an intro to Power BI, but there are some more advanced features of Power BI. So custom functions. How many times do you guys do the same calculation over and over again on a monthly basis or a weekly basis? One thing this would have been really useful for, I don't know if you guys do pre-qualifications, I think it depends where you are, but I was doing a lot of pre-quals when I was doing this interim CFO role. One of our clients in California, and they would always come to me for financial information. And it's just like ratios and different little things. You funnel everything up, you can funnel it up into a Power BI data set or dashboard, and then you can say, hey, what are those ratios at a glance, and then you can just plug them in on the people. And you have up-to-date information, and then you have consistency too. So driving that consistency, that I'm not changing how I calculate this every time. I mean, some of them are pretty standard, but some of them, they might vary a little bit. And so you can just set that custom and you can have it on a card and go and look at it, or you can give somebody else access, which is probably the better way to do it. Give somebody else access and say, hey, go look here at the dashboard and fill out your pre-qual. So this is a custom function here, just how do we calculate profit? I think a lot of the powerful stuff in Power BI comes when you step out of that whole, I'm just going to do click and point transformations, and you can get into custom transformations or custom info. So things like limitations in normal databases. So one of the neat things that I had to do one time is that we kept getting data with different dates at the top. So you couldn't say, this is always going to be weekly, and I always know, but a different date would come in, and it would say date otherwise, so just the word date, and it would have all these different dates. And so we had to program it and make it, I guess, friendly enough so that when you changed the title, you could actually still pull in the data. So we had to make some custom M code and throw that in there, and so that it would just see it and it would accept that new date. Which is really powerful because that's a limitation in databases, generally speaking, is changing column headers. And then DAX. Do we have any advanced Power BI users in the room? How's your DAX? Yeah, DAX should have another X on it. It's like the new 4-letter word, I think. It's super approachable at first, and it gets complicated fast. But what they did is they tried to make it, so it's more for analytics, so it's after you've done the modeling, the transformations, and you use it at that layer, so more visuals, and then bring it into your tables. And really cool stuff, time intelligence, and statistical information. But they did it so that it would be fairly approachable to get started. So you can start with quick measures, and then it gets very complicated fast. And there's a lot of debate on DAX versus Power Query. Power Query is probably a little bit easier to do. And they say, push your transformations as far back as possible and only carry them as far forward as needed. So Power Query is really good, so that would be like that data flows that we talked about, where you want everything kind of coming together and you do those transformations. But then somebody might say, yeah, I want that data flow, but I want to do different measures or calculated columns, and that would be the DAX layer. But again, you can just throw a sum in things and that'll work. It does it for you too. And then the ETL tool, which is Power Query, but beginners start with point and click, and then you go from there and you Google guy in a cube. Did anyone use guy in a cube? Yeah. That's pretty much it for me, but I'd like to hear from you guys. So do you have any stories about any Power BI or any ideas on how you could use this? Yeah?
I have a question. If you were to convince a company to move from spreadsheet server into Power BI, what would be like the key things to do?
So some of the things that we can do is that it's a little more customizable. Well, they're both customizable, but you're kind of limited to spreadsheet servers, I think, GXL. That's like their VLOOKUP, essentially. And then it doesn't quite work like Excel. I don't know if anybody's had that experience, but I do the copy paste and it doesn't really work. So I have to keep copying and repasting. And a lot of times what we do in our Power BI dashboards, especially for financials, is adding data quality and data validation. So I don't know how many times I've been up late and looking for a missing account, but we can flag those things and make it very clear and evident in the Power BI dashboard. And so you're not spending your time clearing that account. And then the other thing is, you have to go and run that beginning balance, and you have to remember to do that. I don't know how many times I've forgotten to do that and be like, why am I out of balance? I have all my accounts, where do I go next? So we can bring that information in, and you can actually see that, and then you can say, hey, run your beginning balance.
Are you advocating to do your financials in Power BI instead, or to enhance it?
Saying you can do either. I mean, you can enhance it by getting all those insights, and then you can go back and do your financials in a different software, whatever you like, or you could have it all in one place. Because you can use paginated reports too to generate those kinds of things and templates, and then you can customize those further. But I like the idea of having everything in one place, personally. Yep.
I would say we moved all of our financials over to Power BI. We still have some legacy ones, but maybe 99% of all our financing, forecasting, everything comes from Power BI.
You do everything in Power BI, like 99%, you said? How's it working for you?
It's worked very well because we're able to push that out to the field now, so they just use a tablet with the Power BI mobile app. So if you're in the shop, you can bring it up and you have full view of everything.
And so they do that with their project management data?
Yeah. Yeah, we do have the form as well.
Yeah, and it's updated, well, it's usually up to date, right? So they can see what's going on right away, and they don't, a lot of the complaints I get is that project managers don't want to dive in and use the reports that exist.
Our experience with RPMs and forms, we hated using Vista.
Yeah, that's a common one.
So everything you guys just basically recreated in Power BI to give a better user experience.
Yeah, we did a labor, it wasn't a labor productivity, but progress entry. We did that in Excel. We moved that over to Excel. So not Power BI, but we did it in Excel so that people could enter their data and we could push it up. And they said it actually brought the morale of the company up. Yeah?
Something that's always put me off of moving folks onto it is I can't make any sense whatsoever of Microsoft's pricing model for it. It's sort of like, this is free to start as a development tool, but once you get into publishing and what have you, then it's some crazy array of licensing, and that I can't even arrive at something approaching a total cost of ownership components.
Yeah, so I guess the questions around licensing and how does that all work and what's cost effective, and it depends is the answer. But a lot of times Power BI Pro is all you need. So they make it free to a degree.
Well, just for the development, but
Yeah, and they get you hooked, and then yeah, to be able to collaborate and share, you have to go up to the subscription model.
but rough math is something like $10 a month for
Yeah, per
users.
user, it's about $10, $12 a month per user, and so it depends, and then you can do like a premium capacity, and then that would just be a lump sum per month, and it depends on your organization. How big is your organization, and what makes sense for you guys?
What would you consider best practice for like publishing a dashboard?
Well, what is the best practice, okay?
Yeah, because I've seen like do it in an app or do it in a workspace or just share it.
So there's a lot of debate around that. I don't think so. The question is, what is the best practice around publishing and sharing information? Do an app, do a workspace, and so I would say, again, it depends. It's very contextual. It's a lot deeper question than probably don't have time to get into. But I would say, if it's related content and you want different bits of information, but you want it over different pieces so that it's, because otherwise you can get really crazy with all these pages in a report, and then no one's really finding out anything. So then sometimes it's just nice to be like, okay, I want to go to this app for this purpose. So like the PM dashboard that I talked about, we have the PM dashboard, and then, okay, well next we have, how's our labor productivity, right? That might be a natural next question, but they may not want to go there. They may know that their productivity is really good. I want to go look at material costs. So I think it would depend. And Diamond Cube actually has a really good video on this. Yeah, and because you can do a viewer role too in workspaces, so it used to be like you must go to an app. Now it's like, I'm not sure, because we can do that viewer role and they can't touch the data set, because it used to be don't go to what's it called? So there's the app and then there's the published workspace.
Yeah.
Don't give them access to the workspace. It used to be just go to the app, but now you can do the viewer role and take access to the data set away. Yeah.
Do you have any clients where you work with them to implement Power Virtual Agents inside of Teams, sort of the chatbot portion of that, to combine it with the data and the analytics that you get within Power BI, so people can ask, questions how you would normally ask a question about a project, and then
Right.
maybe then throw them over into a dashboard? Do you have anything like that? Have you done stuff?
I haven't done stuff like that. I haven't used a chatbot that much. A lot of our clients don't necessarily need it, but it can be really handy. So using the chatbot was a question, that's Power Platform. Have we used it to combine with the data analytics? Haven't done that yet. Would be really cool to look at though, and gather that information. But a lot of times they're really good for, store opening hours or kind of small things like that. Or HR, I need to request leave. Okay, what type of leave? So you could, and you can do that with the Power Platform too, and then get with the Power App and make that flow, right? So that, okay, now I'm gonna let you request leave. Click on this button.
Yeah, I've done some simple things where I can basically query static data, right? But I haven't gotten towards the point of connecting that data platform into an SQL table that's pulling from within Vista or something like that.
Yeah, because you have to be concerned about storage, and where do we store it, and how do we store it?
Yeah, Azure and cloud.
That's the answer to everything. Yeah.
So, is there a source control mechanism here? It looks like DAX might be a language that you could probably keep in source control, but Power Query is that, I read a lot of SQL, I keep in source control.
Okay.
Can you use that with those technologies?
So what are you trying to achieve? What's the end goal?
Oh, well, basically keeping track of the changes that you do, right? So.
Oh, track changes, yeah. Yeah, you could do a little bit of that. It depends who's controlling everything and the data sets and who's publishing, right? Because you can just overwrite all the time too. But you can implement some controls. I think it would be maybe a little bit more manual. a process, but yeah, you can, and you can see like last time it was published and overwritten, and you can go back.
Okay.
What would be your guidance for a company that is new to Power BI and you want to get up to speed as quickly as possible? Is there a Power BI boot camp that you would recommend, or what would be your training program?
So my recommendation on starting Power BI, if you've got Excel users and you've got some of the advanced stuff who's interested in stuff, maybe start with them. But a lot of the stuff you can find online, and it's free. So how do I start? You can do Power BI 101 classes online on YouTube, and then just get the idea of what you can do. And then a lot of times what I like to do is give people projects, because nothing drives you more to do something than a deadline. It's usually my thought. And it forces you to learn, right? So then you get into these nuances and these little bits of information that you have to dive into that you otherwise may not never know, right? So that's how I do it. Like, set somebody up, they go to a Power BI 101, they do that on YouTube, and then they start with a project and maybe like a simpler one. How can we get this up into a dashboard? How can we get better information? And start there. Anybody else? Yeah.
What are you hearing out of Viewpoint in terms of enhanced Power BI functionality within the analytics platform and things like that? I kind of, leading up to the conference, Rep acted like there were going to be some great big announcements about the expanded role of Power BI and being able to do lots of different types of reports and being able to do custom Power BI and put your own Power BI into your analytics. And, are you hearing, and by and large, nobody's spoken of it other than a little hint at financials coming to, I think there was one session I was in that they said that like they were going to give us the chance to do financial reports again, not in spreadsheets or in Power BI.
Okay.
But that's the only thing I've heard out of anybody. Because I know you can't speak directly from Viewpoint, but
No, I can't speak directly.
what are you hearing?
But I did ask them about this. I had the same question. So the question is, what have I heard from Viewpoint on the usage of Power BI? How we're going to expand that? So I had the same question, and I asked somebody who was presenting how they put their visualizations together, what did they do, what was their methodology, and they said, yeah, they want to expand and use Power BI as the analytics layer, that they were kind of started on that and building a direct connection. That's what I understood from the conversation. So I think a lot of assets may be built out. I don't know when, I don't have timelines from them, but I have heard that that's the way they're going to go. Which is probably why they let me present on Power BI. Yeah. Yes?
Did they mention like that the security would flow like this in spreadsheet server?
Pardon me?
Like the security would flow to Power BI like it does in spreadsheet server?
Yeah, so you can, because you can do different roles. So the question is around security, does it flow just like it does in spreadsheet server? So in spreadsheet server, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just you have a certain amount of licenses and you assign them to a user. So you can do that, but it's probably more flexible in Power BI is what I would say, because I have had instances where it's like I want someone else to go fix something for me and they can't access the information because they can't see spreadsheet server, they don't have a license, and it gets quite pricey to get that license, so you'd have to transfer it over or move it, and that's for your IT guys to do. But one of the nice things is you can spin up a license really quick. You can assign someone Power BI Pro or kind of license, and they can just go jump into it. And so, yes, and you can do role level security. So I can look at the same dashboard as you, and you might see something different because I can say, I only want you to see our German division information. But for me, maybe I have access to everything. And so you can actually like manipulate it a little bit better and have a little bit more control over it. And the different types of roles, viewers, and do they have access to collaborate, manipulate data sets? Does that answer your question? Yep.
On the topic they brought up before, the cloud, they've got 3 Power BI reports right now, I understand.
I did hear that too, yeah.
Yeah, the intent is to allow you to create grow, let it grow. And what I'm hearing, and I'm confident, understanding that they're gonna take care of the licensing issue for the end users.
Okay.
That's the intent.
So the comment is, the intent is to move to the Power BI cloud and control the licensing, or take care of the licensing.
They'll take care of the license.
So that'll be, is that going to be built into the subscription to Viewpoint?
The subscription for
Okay.
this cloud.
That'd be interesting, because then who's your administrator and who's handling all that? So that could get interesting for sure. Do we have to go to Viewpoint to add a user, like, you know, right? And do we want somebody maybe who isn't a Viewpoint, just a user, to be able to go access that information? So how do we do that? So that'd be an interesting discussion. Anybody else?
Yeah, so out of your dashboards now, what have been the most impactful for your clients that you see personally?
That's a tough question. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes the PM dashboards are really useful, especially because you can bring in outside information like COVID information. Was this area impacted by COVID protocols? And you can see that. Did that hamper the guys, right? Like, am I spending more time doing different things, like, you know, temperature checks, right? Backhand information. So I find that very helpful. And because they're making a lot of beans and the accounts are counting them, I think like that can be really impactful really quick, especially when you get PMs on board and they can just go look at something and say, hey, what's going on here, and dive in really fast. So I would say a lot of the PM dashboards and a lot of the labor productivity stuff, because PMs do have, you know, direct influence over their productivity. They can change that. They can influence it. A lot of the other things, you know, we're a little bit of bystanders on material costs. We can't really influence, and we have some sway, but that's probably the most impactful, I would say. I mean, the financials one, I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be great, especially with, you know, being able to then produce a deliverable of that and get our balance sheet and income statement done. I think that that's going to be super impactful, and it'll just have everything in one place. So it's not fully complete. Yeah, partially complete. All right, well, if we're done, thanks everyone, appreciate your time, thanks for coming.